My name is Jake, and I'll never forget the night when my friends and I decided to take a different route home from a party. We were trying to avoid the traffic on the regular road, but instead, we found ourselves in a nightmare. It was around midnight when we left the party. My best friend Tom and I were on our bikes, and our friend Lisa was riding with Tom. The night was cool, and the sky was clear. We were in high spirits, laughing and joking as we rode through the empty streets. Tom suggested taking a back road he knew of, saying it would be quicker and less crowded. We all agreed and turned onto the unfamiliar path. The road was narrow and winding, cutting through dense woods. The further we went, the darker it got. The trees seemed to close in around us, and the only sound was the hum of our bike engines. We rode in silence for a while, the eerie atmosphere dampening our spirits. Suddenly, Tom's bike sputtered and died. He tried to restart it, but the engine wouldn't turn over. "Jake, hold on a second," Tom called out. I pulled over and parked my bike, watching as he fiddled with the ignition. Lisa got off the bike and stood by the roadside, looking around nervously. After a few minutes, Tom managed to get the engine running again. We all breathed a sigh of relief and got ready to leave. As I started my bike, I noticed something strange. No matter how much I revved the engine, my bike wouldn't move. It was as if the wheels were stuck to the ground. "What the hell?" I muttered, trying again. The engine roared, but the bike stayed put. "Jake, what's going on?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. I didn't have an answer. Tom walked over to check it out, but there was nothing visibly wrong with the bike. We were stumped and starting to feel a growing sense of dread. Suddenly, I heard a crunching sound. I looked down and saw my bike's number plate crumpling up like it was made of paper. It was being crushed by some invisible force. "Guys, we need to get out of here now," I shouted, panic rising in my chest. Tom and Lisa got back on their bike, and I kept trying to get mine to move. Finally, with a jerk, it lurched forward, and I sped off behind them. We didn't stop or look back until we were far away from that cursed road. When we finally reached a well-lit, busy street, we pulled over to catch our breath. My heart was pounding, and I was drenched in sweat. Tom, Lisa, and I exchanged worried glances. None of us could explain what had just happened, but we all knew one thing for sure: we would never take that route again. To this day, I can still hear the sound of my number plate being crushed. It haunts me, a chilling reminder of the night we ventured onto that forsaken road. We never spoke of it again, but the memory lingers, a shadow over our once carefree friendship.
My name is Emily. When I got accepted into my dream university, I was excited to finally have a place of my own. Little did I know, my new apartment would become a living nightmare. When I first stepped into the apartment, it seemed perfect. The rent was affordable, and it was within walking distance of my university. The building was old but charming, with its creaky wooden floors and vintage fixtures. I liked that. The first few nights were uneventful. I busied myself with unpacking and getting settled. However, things began to change when I found an old, dusty mirror hidden behind the wardrobe. It was ornate and beautiful, with intricate carvings on its frame. I decided to hang it in the hallway. It started with small things. At night, I would hear faint whispers, barely audible, as if someone was murmuring just beyond the walls. I shrugged it off, attributing it to the quirks of an old building. But then, I began to notice shadows moving in the corner of my eye. Whenever I turned to look, there was nothing there. One evening, while I was studying, I felt an icy breeze brush past me, even though all the windows were closed. My breath hitched as I glanced around the room, my heart pounding in my chest. The air grew colder, and the whispers grew louder. They seemed to be coming from the direction of the mirror. Curiosity got the better of me, and I walked toward it. As I stared into the glass, my reflection began to distort. My face twisted into a grotesque, unrecognizable form. I stumbled back, my heart racing, convinced it was a trick of the light. But when I looked again, my reflection was normal. That night, I couldn't sleep. The whispers turned into cries, and the shadows seemed to gather around the mirror. I covered it with a sheet, hoping to block out whatever malevolent force was behind it. But the disturbances only grew worse. One night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps echoing in the hallway. I sat up in bed, straining to hear. The footsteps grew louder, closer. They stopped right outside my bedroom door. Holding my breath, I listened, my body frozen with fear. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and a chilling gust of wind swept through the room. I saw a figure standing in the doorway. It was a woman, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes hollow and empty. She wore a tattered dress, and her hair hung in tangled, dirty strands. She stared at me, her lips moving silently. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. She raised a bony finger, pointing toward the mirror. The sheet covering the mirror fluttered as if caught in a breeze, and then it was violently ripped away. The glass shimmered, and I saw the woman's reflection within it. She stepped into the room, her movements slow and deliberate. I finally found my voice and screamed, but no sound came out. She reached for me, her fingers cold and clammy against my skin. I woke up the next morning in my bed, drenched in sweat. It had to be a nightmare, I told myself. But the mirror was uncovered, and the room still felt unnaturally cold. I decided I couldn't stay there any longer. I packed my things and left the apartment that same day. I later found out from a neighbor that the previous tenant had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. No one knew what happened to her, but some believed she had been driven mad by the apartment's haunting presence. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that the mirror still holds a part of her, waiting for its next victim. And every now and then, when I'm alone, I hear those faint whispers, a chilling reminder of the terror I escaped.
My name is Mark. As an avid hiker and nature enthusiast, I often seek out remote locations to explore. One particular trip to a hilly region left me with an experience I'll never forget. The journey began on a crisp autumn morning. I had heard rumors of an old, forgotten road deep in the hills, known as Black Hollow Road. Locals whispered about its haunted history, but I brushed it off as superstition. Armed with my backpack and a sense of adventure, I set off to find it. The drive to the hills was uneventful. The road twisted and turned through dense forests, the vibrant fall colors painting a beautiful landscape. After a few hours, I arrived at a weathered signpost that read Black Hollow Road. It was barely legible, covered in moss and vines. The road itself was a narrow, winding path that disappeared into the dense forest. I parked my car at the entrance and began my hike. The path was overgrown and rugged, the trees towering above like silent sentinels. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the only sound was the crunch of leaves under my boots. As I ventured deeper, an eerie silence settled over the forest. No birdsong, no rustling leaves, just an oppressive, unsettling stillness. After an hour of walking, I came across an old, rusted car abandoned by the side of the road. Its windows were shattered, and the interior was overgrown with moss and weeds. It looked like it had been there for decades. A chill ran down my spine as I realized how isolated I was. Continuing on, I noticed the forest growing darker, the trees seeming to close in around me. A thick fog began to roll in, obscuring my path. The atmosphere grew heavy, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. I kept walking, my heart pounding in my chest, when I heard it, a faint, distant wailing sound. It was barely audible, but it sent a shiver through me. I quickened my pace, hoping to find an end to this forsaken road. The wailing grew louder, more distinct. It sounded like someone in pain, their cries echoing through the fog. Panic set in, and I broke into a run. The road seemed endless, twisting and turning with no clear direction. Suddenly, I stumbled upon an old, dilapidated house. It was barely standing, its walls crumbling and roof caved in. The wailing was deafening now, emanating from within the house. Against my better judgment, I approached the front door, which hung loosely on its hinges. As I stepped inside, the temperature plummeted. My breath came out in visible puffs, and I could see my surroundings clearly despite the fog outside. The interior was in shambles, furniture overturned and debris scattered everywhere. The wailing seemed to come from the basement, a dark stairway leading down into the depths of the house. I hesitated, every instinct telling me to turn back, but something compelled me to continue. I descended the stairs, the wooden steps creaking under my weight. The wailing grew louder, more agonizing. At the bottom, I found a small, dimly lit room. In the center was an old rocking chair, and in it sat a woman. Her appearance was ghastly, her skin pale and translucent, her eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. She rocked back and forth, her mouth open in a silent scream. The wailing was all around me, but her lips did not move. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to look away from her haunting gaze. Suddenly, the wailing stopped. The silence was deafening. The woman's eyes locked onto mine, and she whispered, "Leave this place." Her voice was barely audible, but it echoed in my mind. I turned and fled up the stairs, out of the house, and down the road as fast as I could. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. Gasping for breath, I looked back at the entrance to Black Hollow Road. The fog had lifted, and the forest was silent once more. I drove away, vowing never to return. To this day, I can still hear the wailing in my nightmares. The memory of that haunted road and the ghostly woman in the rocking chair haunts me, a chilling reminder of the terror I encountered in the hills.